title of our next panel discussion is not taken from a novel, but from a record album, and quite an old one actually. In Manhattan, there's a famous jazz club called the Blue Note. It issued a collection some decades ago of some of the new jazz players, and it called its collection The New Breed Plugs In. And I thought that's just perfect for our next panel discussion. When I found APL, or to speak more accurately, when APL found me, it was very common for APL to be a new user's first language, to be someone's first introduction to coding. These days, I think that would be pretty unusual. Someone who's likely to encounter APL, or as I still like to think of it, as being found by APL, has probably already learned another language, or possibly even more likely 3. The world, as it appears to a new APL user now, is very different from how it was some time ago. And this panel discussion is to explore that. And I'd like to welcome up onto the stage my first guest for this discussion, our most recent of our hires, Martina Crippa.
Thank you.
Martina, when did you start working with Dyalog?
Well, I started exactly 1 month and 18 days ago, the 1st of August.
And counting.
I have a watch that also displaying days, so easy.
And had you done any computing before that, any programming?
Yes, basically in science, because I had a good idea of starting a PhD in computational material science. So I used basically some other coding languages for analyzing my data. And so I developed...
So how far back did that go? Where was your first encounter with programming?
Well, no, the very first was at the very first year of my bachelor in physics, when we were introduced to C.
C?
Yes.
C was your first programming language?
Exactly. But then it just went through C++ quite quickly. So, yeah, but the very first coding lesson I had was C.
And how did you find that for physics?
Well, it was fun.
You had nothing to compare it with, of course.
No, well, yeah. I mean, computational physics is a huge thing, I guess. So, yeah, we did pretty much 3 courses of C and C++.
So by the time that you came to APL, and we'll come in a moment to how that happened, you'd done a fair bit of programming in C and C++, and this was mostly around your studies in physics.
Yes.
Computational physics.
Oh, yes. Statistical mechanics and computational physics, yes.
Ah.
But
I don't actually know what that is.
Well, me
but
neither.
I was just reflecting. I went up to university the first time round to study mathematical physics because we didn't have so many computers then.
But actually, during the PhD, I mainly used Python. So, yeah, I also branched again on a different coding language.
So how did you come up against rogue language APL?
Well, APL found me, I would say, because, I was pretty much looking for a job, and then I found this offer, and I was quite surprised when I looked at what actually APL was, because I was like, whoa, this is different, this is interesting. So, yeah, I looked a bit into it, and I found it interesting, and then when I got the job, I was quite happy because, we all want to work in something that we find interesting, and now I still finding it interesting, and while I'm still learning a lot, so I'm quite a novice at it.
So did I hear that right? This started with a job offer?
Yes.
A job advertisement?
Yes.
Yes. And the job advertisement said they were hiring APL programmers?
Well, it was not a requirement, like knowing APL,
yes.
But Dyalog was looking for an APL developer, and yeah,
I already know 3 languages. I could learn that.
Exactly. But, well,
But when you saw it, you thought, oh, this isn't like what I've learned before.
sorry?
When you saw APL,
Mm-hmm.
was this before you applied for the job? Did you look into it? Do a little
Well,
research?
yes, I saw the advertisement and then did some research about it. And since it was, I tried it a bit, I played with it a bit. And yeah, it was fun, so I applied.
Did your research lead you to try APL?
Yes, well, first of all, I went on the website. And then since it's plenty of nice materials, I went through the materials. And there was this, the very first thing I did was the APL tutorial, the one with this kind of interactive page. And then I also tried Try APL, and I was quite surprised about how easy it was to actually try APL without even having to download it or, installing it. So,
do you remember a wow moment? Gita was describing one earlier where she saw 3 numbers plus 3 numbers and was like, wow, no loops, no counters, no variables.
well, for me was when I saw how to compute the average of a vector just by very short string of primitives. That was like, wow.
All right. So you applied and you got hard, and now you're moved up to Copenhagen?
Yeah, well, I was already in Copenhagen. Yes, I was already there. And so I pretty much started and going up and down from Elsinore and Copenhagen. And
well, it's been a month and 18 days already. What have you been going?
Sorry, where?
What have you been working on?
Well, I'm learning APL with Adam. That is a wonderful teacher. I think that also is merit that I'm learning APL and also I'm enjoying it so much. And yes, I've also started another project, but for that project I'm mainly coding in C. So, but yeah, it's I would say that I'm mainly learning APL.
And do you have hopes, expectations for what you'll be working on in the next year or 5?
Oh well, actually, I'm open to whatever, as long as involves APL. I'm happy with it, I would say. So I think I'm in the right company.
It's great that you found a groove that you're enjoying working in. Let's turn now to Josh Davis. Just come on up. Josh, we met years ago, didn't we?
Yeah, probably 8 years ago, right here. My first user meeting, 2016.
If we didn't meet in Scranton sometime, or maybe that.
Yeah, you probably came before. I was involved in the APL scene.
Why don't you tell us that story about how that happened? And remember to include the porches.
Oh, yeah, well, you talk about Scranton having a sort of porch life where people sit out on their porches and interact with neighbors. So my story of how I got into APL was my neighbor introduced me to APL, Paul Mansour, and he has a company, the Carlisle Group. A few people are here from that today. So that was my first experience with programming, actually. Also, was him teaching me APL.
How does that happen if he's walking past and you're just across the road sitting on your porch? Did you have a rocking chair?
Well, he was just a close family friend, and then, we'd be tossing the football around, and then one day he pulls out a sheet of white paper and explains what a function is, takes input and it returns output. So, and then eventually I did an internship with him, and I got to open up a function. I saw a function from Phil last, which blew my mind. And I like challenges, so that also started getting me interested in APL. And I did a lot of work with Steve as well, Paul's brother. Steve taught Paul APL, or introduced him to it. And so there's kind of this one-to-one mentorship we see as common in APL. And I think that's interesting because I think we could teach APL to a lot of people just by introducing it to them. I think it's an easy language to learn if you actually hold someone's hand a little bit to get them to the intermediate stage. Yeah.
What do your friends think?
It's a good hook to show them, they definitely get interested in it. If you could show them what you could do with a few symbols, they think it's crazy. But that also could be one of the downfalls of APL, maybe. It's so easy to get very advanced, and people get lost quickly with APL. So I like to teach APL very simply, one symbol at a time, even if it takes, you have to break one line into 10 lines. I think that's a better way of teaching APL, especially to younger folks.
Are the friends you're showing this to also coders? Or are you doing what Paul did and showing it to people who had no experience at all?
It depends on who I'm showing it to. I went to school for computer science, so it was harder to get the computer scientists on hook because it's so foreign to them. But I also work with a lot of engineers who aren't programmers. And if you just show them that you could just take data from Excel, paste it in a variable, and just run the unique on it, and you get a result immediately. You don't need to teach them about anything, but that's usually enough to get them interested. And then you start with very simple things like showing them how to sum or, get the product of a column. I found I had more success with those folks. And that's also, I think, is a unique area where APL can succeed now, is with a lot of these data scientists coming into APL are not programmers. So there's a chance to potentially market APL to a lot of new people if we teach the basics to them.
And are you mentor to somebody else now?
It comes up in my work duties, yes. Yeah.
What are you working on these days?
I'm primarily a consultant in production APL environments. So I do a lot of work in a research center with some engineers who are not programmers. And part of my job is also to train them APL a bit. And then, yeah.
Well, let's turn now to another recent APL inductee. Sandra Persson, would you come up and join us? Okay, Sandra, what's your story?
So I had actually never heard of APL before starting this job, but I was very interested in programming. And I discovered programming when I did my master in psychology. So I learned a bit of R for statistics, guess similar to you. And then I started collecting EEG data. So I learned some MATLAB for data analysis. And then I really, really liked the programming part. So I figured I should continue with the programming instead. And also did a course, like an introduction course in programming with Python and C#.
So the data was more fun than the psychology.
Yeah. The code was so much fun. So I decided to stick with the coding.
When we were in Cambridge last month, there were a lot of shops selling university memorabilia, ball caps and sweatshirts, and there was one shop which was selling T-shirts which had nothing to do with the university, and they had in their window something that says, "I hate morning people and mornings and people." So you moved from the people side of psychology to the statistics side, yes. And did you were responding to an advertisement, I think?
Yeah,
you saw a job advertised.
Yeah, so the same ad that you saw.
Oh.
And I felt it spoke to me.
Oh, this was the same ad.
Yeah, actually,
Oh.
I think it's the exact same ad.
This
Yeah.
same ad. Okay.
So tell us what happened.
Yes, I just saw the ad, so it said like, did you study I can't remember, a technical subject something, but you found the coding much more fun.
My ad was saying, did you study science? And
Yeah.
then you find more interesting the part of having to implement some tools for studying science rather than studying science itself. Something similar.
Whoever wrote this ad, this is a good ad.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was genius. Absolutely.
So when did you actually get to see APL for the first time? Martina was telling us how she researched ahead and took a look at it.
Yeah, so I did a little bit of like Googling, so I found these weird symbols. I'm like, wow, what is this? That doesn't look like anything I've seen before. So I found it quite intriguing and a little bit intimidating, but I really wanted to like learn it when I looked at it because it looked so different.
Okay. So the weirdness was a little intimidating, but also attractive.
Yeah, definitely.
Same true for you?
Yes,
Yeah.
a bit mystical, I would say, you know.
Yeah. Or for you, it's just normal. That was the first programming you'd seen.
I wouldn't say normal.
Well, we're talking about pool here, so
Yeah.
it's an outlier.
Yeah.
Cool. And when did you start work?
I started middle of February.
February.
Yeah.
Yes. And what have you been working on since then?
Yeah, so I first just started learning the language, and then I worked on this protobuf project that I presented.
And you too have a mentor, I believe.
Indeed.
Let's have him up on stage now. Gil Athoraya, would you join us, please? Gil, of course, is not supposed to be here. He's not one of the youngsters anymore. There was a time, but no longer. Now you're one of the stalwarts of APL. But you're Sandra's mentor and teacher.
Yes.
And you too. Well, would you tell us your story about how you got into APL?
Do you really want everyone to know?
It's a risk we all take.
I'm not sure how far back to go, but
You can start with dinner.
dinner. Well, we could start a little bit before dinner.
Okay.
I did electrical engineering in university because I found it really interesting to know how things work, especially computers and VCRs, etc. Wasn't so much into programming, and I had a bit of a fear of ending up with programming as my job, a day job, because I had this idea that programmers sat in a room somewhere isolated and just hacking away, never meeting people or interacting with them, and I didn't want to end up like that. Move forward, I find myself in London and I'm looking for a job, just finished studying and can't find or get a job in my field. So I work in a Louis Vuitton shop in the stockroom. And through a friend there, she invited me for dinner and I go to her place and bump into this gentleman. And talking to Stephen, he tells me about what he's doing. I'm sharing my horrible stories from the stockroom, how stressful it is, and not interesting at all for me, coming with my background. And he tells me what this J language looks like, and you know, because I was saying I didn't want to work with programming, but this is my background. And he tells me a bit about J and APL in general, sells it in a really memorable way. I think you said something like APL is like writing poetry. Yes. And and of course I was very intrigued. I think another side of this is my father studied Semitic languages and anything from Arabic back to cuneiform. And I remember some days I was trying to spend a little bit of time with him because he was studying through my childhood. So I would go up to his study and look at all these funny symbols, and he would give me simple tasks to, can you identify all these symbols, the syllable C or something, and I would try to take notes and help him out. But I found it so boring. And of course it's part of my heritage. So I'm Assyrian, so I remembered it, but I didn't want to do what he was doing because I was so afraid of ending up in a study like him. Not seeing his kids and spending a lot of time reading and looking at odd symbols. But yes, so you showed me J and APL, and something just clicked. It was like, this is somehow tying back with my roots. This is a language that is very expressive and mystic, and it's nothing like programming, and I don't know, exclusive. Can I use that?
And I must say, I've heard that comment about my code before. It's nothing like programming.
Yeah. And here we are, 20 years later.
I seem to remember there was a paper napkin involved as well.
It was,
a bit of a cliche, but
yeah.
yeah. And if I recall, I got up the next morning and found an email message saying that you'd downloaded some trial software and experimented with the tutorials, and it all looked very interesting, and I had to go to work.
Yeah.
I was pretty impressed.
Well, I didn't really know what I would do after that. I mean, you teased me. You showed me this thing, and there was no job adverts even mentioning APL. And I was a bit frustrated, but hopeful, because I thought, there's this language, and I think you responded quite quickly to my email, giving me the opportunity to learn more and learn from you. So I was sort of hopeful that maybe this will lead to something. And yeah, the rest is history.
I've long claimed it as the best thing I've done professionally is to train somebody smarter than me. Well, that's enough of my questions. I'll open it up to the floor here.
So I think we've heard from the past the wow moments and the things that people have experienced, but the modern culture around programming is very different than it used to be in the 80s. And so when you first engaged with the language and you saw something different, but what was your value assessment looking at the language compared to what you see in the larger world? Where do you feel that APL finds its place maybe today, and how that might be different than, say, in the past?
Well, for me, I would say that I was just having fun, like learning it. Like when I started with the tutorials, the tutorial on the main page of on Dyalog website, and I was just having fun, solving the problems, going through the problems, and that's not what I was having with, for example, when I was reading Python tutorial pages. So, yeah, for me this is a good point.
So do you think the enjoyment factor was a really big part of
for me?
your experience?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, enjoying it and just how easy it is to use, like the instant feedback, just getting started.
Yes.
As well.
Well, sometimes solving the tutorial problem is not all the quest problems is not always easy, but yeah, it's part of the process, I would say.
Yeah, and your comments about being enchanted with the language just from the beginning, because it's fun, because it's mystical, some of these other, that initial experience, I'm wondering if you can distill that out compared to other languages. If you've gotten into a Python REPL or something and you've played with them, you can get immediate feedback and you can solve some toy problems quickly. But what is different about starting up a session and playing with the symbols? Is part of it the mystical symbols? Is part of it the beauty of some of these expressions and writing poetry and things like this? Or is it something about, like Gitta was pointing out, where you can just immediately interact with your data and start doing things like higher level operations more quickly? Or something else? Are you able to distill out what makes it interesting to you? Or what captured your attention right at the beginning?
I think one thing is like learning other languages. There are so many rules to have you should write something, and there are less rules in APL. So it's just like think for yourself that what you think would be the best way, and I really like that part.
So it's more creative.
Yeah, I think it is definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, one thing I didn't notice when I started, but now I noticed after doing work in a few different domains is how well the primitives map across different domains. So I gave a talk about this recently, but it's nice to just, whether it's in finance or chemistry, whatever you're working with, a lot of the symbols and operations you'll find yourself doing there as well. So it's really fun to explore problems. You get your data in, and sometimes I don't even know what I want to do. I just throw the data in and throw some of some some primitives at it, and the answer slowly starts to appear. You just with a very small set, there's only a few possible things that I usually do when you want to tackle data, and I found that was really interesting.
Can I just add to that? I have a colleague that was really excited to try out Copilot and get a recipe for a solution, and that was the solution. Basically, it wrote out the code for you. And what you said about having the freedom to experiment, I think you might have complained about it once, and other of my apprentices, that I keep rewriting the same lines over and over again because I'm not happy about the way it looks. And maybe I've got too much of Stephen's style there. But this thing about trying out expressions and checking how they feel, sort of taste them, is this okay or not? Looks a bit clunky. There must be a better way to express this. And I haven't seen that so much in other languages, but then I have to admit that I haven't got a lot of experience with other languages. So, more flexibility.
I think what you're speaking about is something which is very important in the coding community, but we don't quite know how to talk about it. So people talk quite a bit about the smell of code, whether it smells bad, which is on the surface ridiculous. People talk about stuff being cool. And what I find behind this is that in our work, we rely quite heavily on an aesthetic sense of rightness about what we're doing. And it's very difficult to codify and put that aesthetic sense into words. But it's also very important to our work. And what I'm hearing is that the ability to express yourself creatively and to employ that aesthetic sense is pleasurable in our work. Bob?
I think you guys have covered it very well in different ways. You talked about enjoyment, passion, excitement, rewriting what you've written before because it gives you more, it gives you pleasure, it gives you an aesthetic feeling. So we're talking about art. And what I see is, again, the left brain, right brain thing happening. And we've asked this question before, but every couple of years it comes up. How many people here are left-handed? Well, it's at least one, okay. Not that many, okay. But obviously there's something going on up here that's focusing.
Didn't we have an or earlier today? Left-handed or Canadian?
Oh, here's another one.
Hi, so I guess especially Sandra and Martina, you came from like non-computing specific degrees, like humanities and physical sciences, but then you came to APL through ads, you said, that appealed to the fact that you enjoyed the coding more. Do you think that APL can appeal to people who might have been on your course doing the domain-specific stuff, but maybe who weren't into actually programming computers, but they still have to use computers to analyze their data, for example? What do you think those people would think about it?
I think they would have liked it because you can write something so short and easily and just try it out. So,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like easy to start. So I think that would be been a big appeal.
So conversely, what do you think might be lacking or why you don't see APL in those spaces now? You said you used R and MATLAB, for example. Those are very popular in those spaces, and Python.
Yeah. Well, a lack of education, I would say, because I started in university and my very first computer science class was C and not APL, unfortunately. And yeah, probably that. And because at the beginning, without having a course or a proper education on it is can be intimidating, I would say. So, yeah. But I think that the past me, the 10 years ago me starting physics would have enjoyed an APL course.
Yeah, cool, thank you.
So my next question is kind of bouncing off that but directed more to Josh and potentially Gilgamesh here on the side of teaching. And one thing that stood out to me from Steve Mansour's presentation this year with Tamstat is that you have this DSL that is speaking directly to these domain in the domain that you're teaching about. And I'm wondering if you have experience with students where you're not showing them directly the APL from the beginning, but you're sort of like slowly introducing them from the point that they start at speaking their language with some cover functions and things like this, so they can immediately do the operations they want to do. And then once they start hitting up against those limitations, then you start showing, oh, look, we have more general ways of dealing with data and breaking them out of the shell of the DSL. Do you have any experience with anything like that, and how that might potentially go, or even just thoughts from what your intuition says?
God, do you want to go first? Give me a few minutes to think about this.
I haven't tried using a DSL to teach APL, but I just had an interesting thought. Would you consider like ASCII cover, like J, a DSL for APL? Because I think an important point of APL is the symbols and the expressivity you get with short symbols and seeing how they interact with each other. Even long variable names can hide what the symbols are doing. Oh. But, 0. But also, I think another thing that's been brought up a few times is how there's an artistic appeal to APL, and I think with DSLs you might lose that appeal as well. And I think when we talk about the future of APL, that's important as well, because the other languages are going to catch up with a lot of the features. Like we have NumPy now, which has a lot of the array features that were in APL for decades. So we have to think about what makes APL unique among other languages, and I think symbols and beauty is one thing. You know, like in the mathematician's apology, it's like there's no permanent place for ugly math. So I think it's the same with programming languages too. If we want to keep APL, not Dyalog, but APL going for the next few decades, I think we need to focus on beautiful code too.
Okay, so highlighting the value of aesthetics. Thank you for delineating that clearly.
Well, that's a beautiful note on which to end. Will you please join me in thanking our guests?